Hey, everybody, welcome back. Nick, I think it's time that we talk about a cybersecurity company that has been in the news a bit over the last month and a half for all of the wrong reasons. That company, you've probably guessed it, is CrowdStrike. We're going to talk about their earnings in this episode, as well as what we expect for the company in the future and how we're going to deal with our position in the business.
Yeah, let's do it. And I think maybe we should start by saying there is some good news, and it's this: cybersecurity is still very much a secular growth trend. You may have seen this chart before that we've patched together from expectations from all of the cybersecurity provider leaders. Plenty of growth still very much expected over the course of the next 5 to 10 years.
Cybersecurity industry annual global spend in 2024 is expected to be around $215 billion and expected to continue to have an annual growth rate of around 12% for the next 5 to 7 years, which is not an insignificant growth rate or sum of money. CrowdStrike has traditionally fallen into the endpoint part of the cybersecurity industry. You can see that over there on the right of this chart. That and consumer security make up around $20 billion of that annual spend.
CrowdStrike has been expanding into other areas of the cybersecurity. It's kind of the right hand side of our IT industry flowchart. It's a software business born in the cloud era for the cloud era. They've been steadily increasing their software services or modules to address more of the secular growth trend. And by all appearances, the secular growth trend will smooth over a lot of issues that CrowdStrike might have because of a certain little IT outage that you mentioned that cropped up in July.
Yes, this issue on July 19th was that CrowdStrike pushed out an update that did not end up playing very nicely with Microsoft Windows. In this update from Microsoft, you can see that it affected about 8.5 million Windows devices, which is actually only about 1% of all Windows machines. So, a small portion of Windows users. However, it's who got affected by this issue with CrowdStrike and Windows. A lot of huge companies, business enterprises, for instance, like the airline industry, were affected. And that's what caused this to blow up into being such a big deal. Speaking of cybersecurity with large businesses, cybersecurity for our personal use is just as important. We saw that recently with the theft of social security numbers. And this would be a good time to talk about our sponsor, Aura.com.
It's a really important time to be talking about Aura because hackers have stolen the social security numbers of potentially every single American. Over 2.9 billion records were stolen from national public data, which offers personal information to employers, private investigators, staffing agencies, others doing background checks. Now, these stolen records include a person's full name, address, date of birth, social security number, phone number, all sorts of personal information. And members of the hacker group have reportedly released this information for free on the internet.
This news is super troubling. I know we've had our credit card information stolen, and that was a hassle to get taken care of. I can't even imagine what's going to happen when it's your social security number. But if you were taking precautions with your personal information online before this kind of thing should be a huge wake up call. You've never been more vulnerable online than you are right now. I'm not too worried about it because I have started using Aura. Aura alerts me if they find my phone number, email, or social security number on the dark web. They're going to let me know fast if anyone tries to use this information to access my credit or bank accounts. They also give us up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst case scenario happen. They also provide a bunch of other features to keep you safe online, all inside one single app. You can go to our link at aura.com/chipstockinvestor to try 14 days for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. We recommend that you do this right now because not only is national public data not going to be doing anything about this to help you, it's possible they're not even going to face any repercussions for this leak. We're not leaving ourselves open to data breaches. And if you don't want to either, go to aura.com/chipstockinvestor to try your 2 weeks for free.
Back to our discussion on CrowdStrike. Again, this is a software business, software, cybersecurity software on the right hand side of our chart. Infrastructure cybersecurity on the left, where this whole industry got its start, still very much a necessary piece of the puzzle. We've heard recently from companies like Halliburton, which appears to still be dealing with a fairly large cybersecurity incident as we record this. Transportation for London also undergoing some sort of incident. Their employees were told to work from home as they sort through what is actually happening, what kind of breach they had. All of this is to say, though, as we mentioned in our last update in the week following the Microsoft Windows outage that CrowdStrike caused, we have a very hyper connected world. All of this IT stuff is supposed to make businesses run more efficiently. But the downside to that is it introduces new risk. We live in a very fragile world. One small slip up can cause a ripple effect and cause all sorts of issues for lots of companies. And so this is a key risk now for CrowdStrike going forward because they do have plenty of competition in endpoint security. And so we're going to hear from Broadcom, which now owns Symantec later this week. Of course, Microsoft and Sentinel One, both large players in endpoint security, both would love to use this opportunity to catch up to CrowdStrike again, which is the last couple of years leader in endpoint security. Also, Palo Alto Networks has an endpoint product. All of these businesses looking to take a swipe at CrowdStrike during the aftermath of this crisis.
Let's talk about the financials for this most recent quarter, Q2 fiscal year 2025 for CrowdStrike. You can see that box there in the bottom right on their total revenue. They have continued to perform very well, 32% year over year growth in their revenue. And by other metrics, they've continued to show improvement in their operating income, earnings per share, and on that free cash flow up 44% year over year. Very solid metrics from CrowdStrike in this most recent report. But the issue is not what has happened in the past, but rather what happens in the future. And that is something that we need to focus on when we're talking about CrowdStrike because of that incident in July. This is full year guidance from Q1. Nick, walk us through what that guidance was last quarter and then what they've had to adjust for in this most recent quarter.
Yeah, so you can see the upper end of the revenue guidance for full fiscal year 2025. That's the 12 months that will end in January 2025, just a short 5 months from now. The upper end of that range, 4 billion in full year revenue. And the expectation on the upper end of that was for 1 billion in adjusted net income, which aligns a bit more closely to that free cash flow metric. So they were expecting about a 25% full year net income profit margin. Pretty darn good for a business growing this fast and at scale. But here we are after the Microsoft incident, and they've lowered the high end of that revenue guide down about $100 million, down to 3.9 billion at the high end. For Q3, the implication is about 25% year over year growth. So we're going to see that growth rate dip below the 30% mark. And for the full fiscal year, this new guidance implies about 27% year over year growth. So they have had to bring down the revenue guidance as some of their customers or would be customers, we should say, have paused on signing a new contract. We'll get into that here in just a moment. But more importantly, from our standpoint, is the downgrade in adjusted net income. Again, almost 100 million downgrade reduction in their expectation on the high end. That's about a 9 to 10 percentage point decrease from the prior expectation. Really, what this means, because performance was so strong the first half of the fiscal year, now for the second half of the fiscal year, what before was expanding profit margins, profitability increasing at a faster pace than revenue, as you pointed out with the free cash flow growth in Q2, Kasey. Now we're looking at that trend reversing for possibly the next 6 months, maybe longer. And we don't have a lot of visibility yet into how soon we can expect to turn that around again and return to free cash flow growth and profit margins expanding faster than revenue.
This is an important point to remember in this upcoming quarter and into the next year that what happened on July 19th was in the final 2 weeks of the quarter. And as CEO George Kurtz points out in the earnings call, that's when a meaningful portion of the sales typically close. And it also affects some of those subsequent orders that have since been delayed as well.
This makes perfect sense. After, what was pitched to the media is the largest IT outage ever in history. Maybe it wasn't. If you were thinking about signing a new contract with CrowdStrike, you might take pause now after that and measure twice, so to speak. You might be double checking to make sure this is a cybersecurity provider that you actually do want to sign on with.
The good news is that he said that the majority of the deals do remain in the pipeline. But I think what that ultimately means is they're going to have to do a lot of sweet talking.
Yeah. And we're going to come back to that point again here in just a moment as well, after we talk about this quote from CFO Bert Podbert. So there's another thing that is creating some uncertainty. Again, check our last update where we talked about this whole insurance industry that's building up around cybersecurity. This is a point was not very well known by investors until this Microsoft Windows outage popped up. But there's going to be a lot of litigation from customers that maybe weren't satisfied with the lunch gift cards that CrowdStrike sent out after the outage. Maybe they experienced some sort of loss due to their operations going down or not running smoothly for more than a few hours. CrowdStrike was able to get most companies up and running again within a few hours, but there were some where the outage lasted longer. So these are going to go to court. Podbear was saying here on the earnings call, there's just not a lot of visibility into what those liabilities are going to. This is another area where there's going to be some drag on the profit margin. Again, some good news here. CrowdStrike has a very large net cash and short-term investment position on its balance sheet. They may need to dip into that in the next 6 to 12 months because of these claims and litigation. Kasey, about having to sweet talk some of those prospective customers, let's get back to another quote here from George Kurtz.
Yeah, some of our viewers might be familiar with the term platformization. We've talked about that quite a bit with Palo Alto Networks, and CrowdStrike's management has been critical of this method that Palo Alto was employing. Palo Alto was trying to get their customers on board by giving them access for free or at a heavily discounted price, trying to get them to bundle services, so to speak. And this quote from George Kurtz implies that CrowdStrike is maybe thinking it's not such a bad idea after all. This Falcon Flex model is what George Kurtz is talking about. He uses the term modules, and these modules that customers are able to bundle into services, into a package or a customer commitment package, provides this platformization. They're also using flexible terms for payment, which you can read that as more sweet talking and maybe some Chili's gift cards thrown in or some discounted software services. They're going to have to do a lot of this to make up for what happened in July.
And this is really important to just take a moment and reflect on because these customer commitment packages were spun as a positive thing on the earnings call. It's going to drive more customer consumption of the CrowdStrike cybersecurity platform, which over time, Kurtz and the top team think will ultimately lead to more revenue for CrowdStrike. However, CrowdStrike now suddenly forced to play the same game that Palo Alto Networks kind of set off. We have a consolidating cybersecurity industry. It's too crowded, too many small point vendors. Customers are still looking to consolidate the number of vendors they have into fewer leaders, companies where they can get multiple products in one place. But because CrowdStrike now has to play this game, it's going to hit profit margins in addition to the litigation expense. And so we don't know what that's going to do to profitability growth or maybe the return to profitability growth. Is it going to take 3 months? Is it going to take 6 months, 12 months? And this is why we have frequently mentioned, especially in the last year, the high premium price for CrowdStrike, the high valuation. There's always going to be something with a premium priced, high flying software company like this that brings the valuation back down to earth a bit. You don't know what it's going to be. It could be an external factor, it could be an internal factor, but something is ultimately going to cause a big drawdown in stock price.
And the valuation has historically been quite high, but it's even after the stock price coming back down, it's currently around $277 on September 3rd after hours. It's still not a cheap stock. On a forward basis for price to earnings, you can see that it's 75, 76x. And on a price to free cash flow basis, 58 to 59x. Still would not consider this stock cheap by these metrics.
Yeah, a lot of future profit baked into the share price at these levels. And again, we don't know when that's going to happen. And so, as we often preach here, for most investors, just buying a big chunk of CrowdStrike in your portfolio all in one go, perhaps when you're feeling really good about the stock because you've just seen it double in the last year, even after the big drawdown over the last 12 months, CrowdStrike is still up almost 70%, which is incredible. We are not believers in allocating big chunks of the portfolio all in one fell swoop into a stock like this. This is where a dollar cost average plan, where you buy in small increments and do so over perhaps long periods of time, years, multiple, not one, years, multiple years. Maybe you buy monthly or quarterly. And then along the way, yeah, you might inevitably buy at a peak in price, but you might also catch some really big dips. And along the way, you allow CrowdStrike to prove its worth and to prove its merits as a top position in your portfolio. You'll build the position gradually, and then you'll get some organic growth from the business. And then after a couple of years, maybe you have that core portfolio holding that's 5% or more of your portfolio, but CrowdStrike will have proven itself rather than just making one big giant purchase. It can be a problematic thing doing that if you don't get the timing exactly right, which is obviously easier said.
Let's recap what our three key metrics are to watch post incident for CrowdStrike. The first is we want to wait for fiscal year 2026 guidance for an indicator of revenue and profit growth. That fiscal year 2026 corresponds to calendar year 2025. And so we won't start to see that guidance until around February or March of next year. So we'll need to keep patient on that. We'll also need to see further impact of the litigation related to that July 19th incident. As mentioned, we don't know exactly how that's all going to play out. So we're going to have to be patient because that and the next portion, the impact of consolidation, that platformization, both the litigation impact as well as the impact of switching up the business model to focus more on platformization will impact profitability for CrowdStrike. So there's going to be some changes in that profitability metric. We'll need to see if that ends up being a positive change. Nick, what are we doing with our CrowdStrike position?
At this point, we are in wait and see mode. We have plenty of money already allocated to CrowdStrike, but not long after the IPO and have nibbled along the way in the years since then. So we're more than happy to hold what we have and see how management navigates things in the next few quarters. But we see no reason to add to the position here at this point either. Again, it's the uncertainty of the profit margin growth or the return of profit margin growth that has us giving pause. I believe that's the biggest reason why the stock hasn't quickly rallied back towards all-time highs more dramatically in the last couple of weeks. I think the market is also holding its breath and wants to see what happens with the profit progress that was emerging as such a great story in the last 12 to 18 months up until this point. So that's what we're doing. We still have our cybersecurity basket that consists of pure play leaders, of course, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto Networks, and Fortinet, which we're starting to warm up to again after a very long networking hardware and the security services attached to that. You can catch the video we did on that about a month ago and why we're starting to warm up to that as they kind of emerge from pretty prolonged slump in the wake of the pandemic.
Right. We have much more coming your way at Chipstock Investor. Make sure you sub to the channel and check out that sponsorship that we have for Aura.com. You can find the link in the description below to check out your social security number. Make sure it's not on the dark web.
I hate that we have to talk about that. But unfortunately, this is the world we live in.
It's a thing. We'll see you all again soon at Chipstock Investor.